GDP growth was down to minus 0.3%. Personal consumption expenditure growth was down to minus 3.2%. And my young friends, that is the first contraction that has happened in personal consumption expenditure in the US after 67 successive quarters. Okay? Non-farm unemployment is now up to 6.7%. It is nowhere close to the 10% territory of the early 1990s, and certainly nowhere like the 30% territory during the Great Depression, but 6.7% has not been seen for the last 4.5 years. Okay? Payroll unemployment, that is non-farm, non-agricultural unemployment of people who have payrolls, in November, 533,000 people net lost jobs. Between January 2008 and November 2008, 1.92 million people in the US have lost jobs outside the farm sector. Okay? And it's been really accelerating since August. The housing prices, which is the biggest source of consumer spending because people use home equity to spend, housing prices have dropped 30% from its high in July 2006, and it's not going to recover for quite some time. The Fed rate is down to zero, almost, so there's nothing more that interest rate policy or monetary policy can do. Retail sales, I'm just giving you, and I'll stop here now. Retail sales down in November 8.5%, motor vehicle sales down 25%, furniture sales down 11%, electronics and appliances sales down 5%, building material sales down 5.3%. For every single built, every single sold single unit home, independent home, for every one that is sold in the US, there are 12.4 completed and unsold stock of homes. So the US, ladies and gentlemen, is in serious recession. It is not going to come out of it throughout all of 2009. The Economist's forecast is a minus 1% growth. If the US is bad, the UK is even worse, though through a lesser amount. UK is going to have minus 1.5% growth next year. The Eurozone is estimated to go into recession by 1%, minus 1% growth next year. Japan, minus 1% growth. So, a $40 trillion bloc, the OECD, is minimum going to compress by 1%, probably like 1.5 to 1.75%. In other words, something like a minimum of $400 billion of goods and services, more like $600 to $700 billion of goods and services is going to evaporate. Don't tell me that it isn't going to affect India. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Omkar. Anujit?
Yeah. Nainan, your pointer was how bad is it? This problem is called a financial crisis or a meltdown in the States. We are calling it a slowdown. I think that's also your choice of expression, Omkar. This financial crisis or financial tsunami hit America starting in summer, but crescendoed in September 15th, October 15th in India. And I remember till the early first week of October, people were questioning whether we would get affected, are we coupled, decoupled, and all of that stuff. And I think in 8 working days, the world changed over here after October 15th. So I think, as earlier people said, the jury is out about how America's fortunes would affect India. I think it's now very clear that a weak America ain't good for anybody. And in that sense, in those 8 or 9 days, there are different numbers flying around, something between $10 and $20 billion walked out of India. And we saw that the stock markets, etc., the sentiment, confidence was hugely eroded. So I think it's fair to say that a weak America isn't good for anybody. I was in the States earlier this week. Lots of questions there about what the new administration and how the new administration would augur for our country. I think the reality is that America is broke, and so the new president is going to have to worry about fixing his own country before he starts thinking about what he can do for others. So there's no point asking the question what America can do for India, because it doesn't have much to give at this point in time. So if it just fixes its own house willy-nilly, the trickle down of that, it's interesting that we're using the expression trickle down in the reverse hemisphere, if you will positively impact us. Having said all that, if you look at the market and the media, which I call to some extent, no disrespect intended, Nainan, but the market is certainly a rogue, and sometimes the media is also a rogue. And that has created such fright, such scare in the minds of people that we're beginning to lose confidence in ourselves. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're on our own. So to me, the direction, the point, the theme for us as Indians in India is that we're on our own. And I'm not so sure that's such a bad story, because the fact is that if you look at 1947 to now, which is roughly 60, 61 years, the average life expectancy has grown 24 years in absolute terms. In other words, somebody born in 47 versus somebody born today will live 23 or 24 years longer. The personal income or per capita income would have grown about 5 times for somebody born in 47 to somebody born now. So ask all the people who are our support staff and ask him, are you better off or your father? And he'll tell you he's better off. 80%, 81% of India saves. The fact is also that 52% of that 82% sits as cash and isn't deployed in productive financial instruments and so on and so forth. But India is a internally high savings economy. 68, 69, 67, lots of numbers flying around, is a domestic economy, which means we are domestically invested, we domestically produce, we domestically consume, and we domestically invest. And so if you saw how per capita income has gone up and how life expectancy has gone up, and despite whatever complaints we may have, or for that matter, expectations we may have from government, what India has pulled off in the last, say, 13, 14 years, I think it is quite phenomenal. And looking at our domestically driven economy, and Omkar very rightly in a talk the other day said that the expenditure in America grew 13 times in the last 10 years. Am I right?
No, the personal expenditure grew at 19 times against a GDP growth of
13 times. And so you'd like to say that America's disadvantage was China's gain. We don't have that situation because, as I said, we produce, invest, and consume a lot domestically. And if I may speak from a private sector perspective, I think there is hugely a newfound respect for the private sector in the last 13, 14 years. And examples of privatization and deregulation in telecom, in banking, in airlines, in media, in insurance, in healthcare, in pharmaceuticals, etc., year on year have proven that the private sector enjoys a new respect and a new space in the country, as a better employer, as a more fair employer, with respect to even governance, transparency, and the like. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're definitely hurting, because a weak America doesn't help anybody, but we are a domestically driven economy. And I think that if India takes accountability and responsibility for itself, standing from government to private sector to consumers, I think we'll pull through very nicely.